Empire of Glass. Chapter 1. 43rd Floor. By the time Evelyn Ward reached the 43rd floor, someone was already crying in the executive conference room. Not loudly, the kind of controlled silence that carried farther than shouting ever could. She stepped out of the elevator into chaos disguised as professionalism. Assistants moved quickly without running. Lawyers spoke in low, urgent voices near the glass offices lining the corridor. Every screen on the trading wall flashed the same headline in violent white letters against black. Vail Group acquisition collapses after leaked regulatory probe. $3 billion wiped off the company valuation in less than 2 hours. Evelyn tightened her grip on the leather portfolio tucked against her ribs and kept walking. First day, of course. A woman she didn't recognize intercepted her halfway down the hallway. Blonde, immaculate, Bluetooth in one ear and fury in her eyes. "You're the interim operations analyst?" "Yes." The woman looked Evelyn over quickly, visibly recalculating expectations. Probably because Evelyn didn't look particularly impressive this morning. She'd slept 4 hours. Her dark hair was twisted into a low, not already threatening collapse, and her black heels still carried traces of rainwater from the sidewalk outside. Conference room. Now. The woman pressed a tablet into her hands. "Take notes. Don't speak unless Mr. Vail addresses you directly." Then she disappeared before Evelyn could respond. Through the glass walls ahead, she finally saw him. Adrian Vail sat at the head of the conference table, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled once with mathematical precision. Around him sat 12 executives who collectively looked like survivors of a private catastrophe. One of them, silver-haired, late 50s, rubbed both hands over his face while staring at the financial projections on the screen. The crying had stopped. That somehow felt worse. Evelyn entered quietly and took the only empty chair near the end of the table. No one acknowledged her. Good. She preferred invisibility during situations like this, especially around men like Adrian Vail. Even before moving to New York, she knew his reputation. Everyone in finance did. Founder of Vail Group, tech infrastructure genius, billionaire before 35. The kind of man business journalists described with words like visionary and predatory in the same article. Up close, he was somehow more unsettling. Not because he was handsome, though objectively, unfairly, it was the focus. Nothing about him appeared wasted. Not movement, not expression, not attention. While everyone else in the room reacted emotionally, Adrian remained terrifyingly still. "We have 2 priorities," he said evenly. "Contain the leak. Stabilize investor confidence before market close." His voice was calm enough to make the room quieter. A man across from him leaned forward aggressively. "The board is demanding accountability." "The board," Adrian replied, "can schedule a meeting like everyone else." Silence. No raised voice. No visible temper. Yet the tension in the room tightened instantly. Evelyn lowered her eyes to the tablet, pretending to organize documents while actually studying the people around the table. Fear did interesting things to powerful men. Some became louder. Some became defensive. Some started assigning blame before anyone asked questions. Adrian Vail only became colder. "We should issue a denial," another executive said carefully. "No." The single word landed hard. "The investigation exists," Adrian continued. "Denying it makes us look dishonest. We acknowledge the inquiry, emphasize full cooperation, and release the infrastructure numbers from Q4 ahead of schedule. That exposes the Singapore expansion. It reassures the market. And if the media pushes harder?" For the first time, Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. "Then we remind them," he said, "that Vail Group survived 3 acquisition wars, 2 federal audits, and an attempted hostile takeover before most competitors learned how to spell valuation." A few nervous smiles appeared around the table. Not because the situation improved, because he made them believe it could. Evelyn finally understood how men like him built empires. Not charisma, certainty. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes. Numbers, damage control, legal exposure, shareholder panic. Evelyn took notes silently while memorizing dynamics she wasn't supposed to notice. Who interrupted whom? Who avoided eye contact? Which executives deferred to Adrian instinctively? Which ones feared him personally? By the end, she identified exactly 2 people in the room who told him the truth without softening it. Interesting. As the meeting adjourned, chairs scraped back across the floor in exhausted relief. Conversations erupted immediately. Evelyn stayed seated, organizing files. She preferred leaving after everyone else. Less chance of awkward introductions. You disagree with the projection model. The voice came from directly beside her. She looked up too quickly. Adrian Vale stood at the end of the table, close enough now that she caught the clean scent of cedar and espresso. Without the distance of the conference room, his presence felt sharper somehow. More concentrated. Every instinct told her to become careful. I'm sorry. His gaze dropped briefly toward the tablet in front of her. You circled the debt exposure estimates twice. His eyes returned to hers. Why? No accusation in his tone, which somehow made it more dangerous. Evelyn glanced at the screen. Right? She had circled them, a habit from years of reviewing flawed reports at 2 in the morning. Most executives never notice details like that. You're overestimating recovery speed after the media cycle peaks, she said carefully. Several nearby conversations quieted slightly. Wonderful. Adrian didn't react visibly. Explain. She should probably soften this. Instead, exhaustion won. The model assumes public trust behaves rationally. Evelyn met his eyes steadily now. It doesn't. A beat of silence. One of the executives near the door looked horrified she'd spoken at all. But Adrian only watched her. Continue. So she did. Because apparently self-preservation had abandoned her completely. You're treating this like a financial event when it's becoming a narrative event. Investors recover from numbers faster than they recover from uncertainty. She pointed toward the projection curve. The market panic lasts longer if people think there's something personal being hidden. No one spoke. Evelyn became acutely aware that she was standing in a billion-dollar conference room explaining media psychology to one of the most powerful CEOs in Manhattan. On her first day, excellent decision-making. Finally, Adrian asked, "What's your name?" "Evelyn Ward." "How long have you worked here, Ms. Ward?" She hesitated. "Approximately 2 hours." Something flickered across his face then. Not amusement exactly. Interest. One of the senior executives let out a disbelieving breath. "She's an interim hire from Strategen Consulting." Adrian's eyes never left Evelyn's. "And before consulting? Crisis communications." That explained it. She saw the realization register immediately. Most billionaires underestimated public perception until it started costing them money. Adrian Vale looked like a man who underestimated very little. He glanced once more at the projection model before turning toward the remaining executives. "Adjust the recovery forecasts. Calm. Immediate. Include prolonged media volatility." The silver-haired executive frowned. Based on the fact Ms. Ward is the first person today who identified the actual problem." Silence again. Hot awareness climbed slowly up Evelyn's spine. Not because of the compliment. Because Adrian still hadn't looked away. It lasted 1 second too long. 2. Then his phone vibrated. The moment broke instantly. He checked the screen, expression flattening further somehow. "What now?" another executive muttered. Adrian slid the phone into his pocket. "The Journal is publishing another story in an hour." A curse sounded quietly near the door. Evelyn gathered her papers quickly. Definitely time to disappear. But as she stepped away from the table, Adrian spoke again. "Ms. Ward." She turned. "Don't make plans tonight." The room went still. Not flirtation. Not personal. Which made it infinitely more intimidating. "We're going to be here a while," he said. Then he walked out of the conference room, already taking another call, while half the executive floor moved instinctively to follow him. Evelyn stood there holding her tablet against her chest, pulse behaving strangely. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath cold rain and silver light. And somewhere deep in her instincts, a quiet warning began unfolding. Nothing about Adrian Vale felt safe. Chapter 2. After market close. By 7:30 that evening, the 43rd floor no longer resembled a corporate office. It resembled a siege. Empty coffee cups crowded every flat surface. Half-eaten catered food sat untouched near the legal department because no one trusted their stomachs enough to eat. Television screens cycled endlessly through financial analysts dissecting Vale Group's collapse with the detached excitement of people discussing weather patterns instead of human catastrophe. Evelyn sat cross-legged in a vacant office near the operations wing, reviewing media sentiment reports on her third laptop battery. Her eyes burned. She ignored it. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan dissolved into rain and reflected light. The city looked beautiful from this high up, distant enough to seem harmless. Her phone vibrated beside her keyboard. MOM flashed across the screen. Evelyn stared at it for 2 seconds before answering. "Hey, you sound tired." "I'm working." A pause. "At 10 at night?" Evelyn glanced at the digital clock in the corner of her screen. 10:23. "Right. Temporary contract," she said. "Crisis situation." Her mother sighed softly in the way only mothers could, somehow carrying concern, disapproval, and guilt simultaneously. "You need something stable, Evelyn." "I know." The landlord called again. That tightened something immediately beneath her ribs. Of course he did. She closed her eyes briefly. "I transferred half yesterday. He wants the rest by Friday." I said I know. The silence afterward felt immediate and regrettable. Evelyn rubbed at her forehead. "Sorry. Long day." Her mother's voice gentled. "Are they treating you well at least?" Evelyn's gaze drifted automatically through the glass wall toward the executive offices at the far end of the floor, toward the closed door with frosted lettering that read, Adrian Vale, CEO. Treating her well was probably not the phrase she would have chosen. "Everybody's too busy panicking to mistreat anyone," she said. That earned a reluctant laugh. "Call me when you get home." "I will." After hanging up, Evelyn sat motionless for a moment. Then she reopened the damage control projections and kept working. Because rent still existed whether billion-dollar companies imploded or not. At 11:13, someone knocked once against the open office door. Evelyn looked up automatically. The blonde executive from earlier stood there holding 2 coffees. "You're still here." "So are you." That earned the faintest smile. "I'm Natalie." She handed Evelyn one of the coffees. "Chief of Staff." "Evelyn." "I know." Natalie leaned lightly against the doorway. "You caused a minor identity crisis in the boardroom earlier." Evelyn accepted the coffee carefully. "That wasn't intentional." "That almost makes it worse." Despite herself, Evelyn smiled slightly. Up close, Natalie looked less intimidating than she had that morning. Still polished, still composed, but tired around the edges now. Human. "What exactly is happening here?" Evelyn asked quietly. Natalie studied her for a second before answering. "You want the official explanation or the real one?" "The real one usually saves time." Another brief flicker of approval. "The real one," Natalie said, "is that somebody leaked confidential regulatory information before the acquisition finalized, which means either Vale Group has an internal breach." She paused. "Or somebody powerful wants Adrian destroyed." "Not the company." "Adrian. Interesting. Do you know which?" "If we did, this floor would be calmer." Down the hallway, raised voices erupted briefly near legal before disappearing again. Natalie glanced toward the noise with visible exhaustion. "He hasn't stopped moving since 6 this morning," she muttered. Evelyn knew immediately who she meant. As if summoned by the thought, Adrian emerged from his office farther down the corridor, phone pressed against one ear. The entire floor shifted subtly when he appeared. Not dramatically. No one straightened self-consciously or fell silent like in movies. It was quieter than that. More instinctive. Attention reorganized around him automatically. Adrian ended the call while walking, expression unreadable as he scanned the operations floor. Dark suit jacket back on now. Tie loosened slightly, fatigue visible only in the sharper lines around his eyes. Then his gaze landed on Evelyn. And stopped. Even across the room, the awareness hit hard enough to feel physical. Annoying. Natalie noticed it too. Interesting. He remembers everyone, she said quietly. That sounds exhausting. For him or everyone else? Before Evelyn could answer, Adrian crossed the remaining distance toward them. People moved out of his path unconsciously. Not fear exactly. Efficiency. Status update, he said to Natalie. Legals reviewing the journal piece before publication. Investor calls stabilized after the revised forecast release. His eyes shifted toward Evelyn. The revisions helped. Not praise. Observation. Still, warmth crawled unexpectedly beneath her skin. Professionalism, apparently, had become fragile after 14 consecutive hours awake. Adrian looked toward the report spread across her desk. What are you reviewing? Media sentiment mapping. Why? Evelyn blinked once. Because your communications department is tracking volume instead of emotional trajectory. Natalie made a quiet, choking sound into her coffee. Adrian's expression didn't change. Meaning, the anger isn't the dangerous part yet. Evelyn turned one of the screens slightly toward him despite herself. Distrust is. He stepped closer to see the data. Too close. Not intentionally inappropriate. Just close enough that she became sharply aware of details she absolutely did not need to notice right now. The clean scent of rain lingering faintly in wool. The expensive watch beneath his cuff. The quiet concentration in his face when he listened. Evelyn forced herself to focus on the screen. People forgive aggressive business decisions, she said. They don't forgive feeling manipulated. And your solution? Visibility. Natalie frowned slightly. Meaning interviews? No. Interviews look defensive. Evelyn pointed toward the trending analytics. You need controlled transparency. Let investors see operations functioning normally. Employees working. Infrastructure moving. Confidence has to look real before people believe it is. Adrian studied the screen silently. Then he asked, "How much sleep have you had?" The question caught her off guard. "Excuse me? You've been staring at that graph for 9 minutes without blinking." Heat rose instantly into her face. "I'm fine." That was it. Just a quiet sound. Yet somehow Evelyn felt evaluated anyway. Before she could recover, another man approached quickly from the elevator corridor. Tall, expensive navy coat, political campaign smile. Unlike everyone else tonight, he looked energized by the disaster. Adrian. The man extended a hand casually. Hell of a day. Adrian's posture altered almost imperceptibly. Colder. Daniel. The handshake lasted less than 2 seconds. Tension moved instantly through the air. Evelyn looked between them carefully. Rivals. Not business competitors exactly. Something more personal than that. Daniel's gaze shifted toward Evelyn and Natalie. Interrupting. Yes, Adrian said flatly. Daniel smiled anyway. I only came to offer support. The media cycle's getting ugly. How compassionate of you. Natalie suddenly found her coffee extremely interesting. Daniel ignored the hostility smoothly. There's already speculation about federal exposure. Speculation from whom? Tiny pause. There. The first real crack. Daniel recovered immediately. Journalists talk. Of course they do. The silence between the two men sharpened. Evelyn understood suddenly that this conversation had very little to do with journalism. Daniel finally looked toward her again. You're new. Evelyn Ward. Daniel Cross. She recognized the name instantly. Cross Capital. One of Vail Group's largest investment rivals. And apparently familiar enough to walk directly onto the executive floor during active corporate collapse. Interesting. Daniel smiled easily at her. My condolences on your first day. Thank you. She'll survive it, Adrian said before she could say more. The words landed strangely. Not protective exactly, but personal enough to unsettle her. Daniel noticed too. Something calculating flickered briefly behind his expression before disappearing. "Well," he said lightly, stepping backward toward the elevators. "Try not to destroy Wall Street before Monday." Adrian didn't answer. The elevator doors closed behind Daniel a moment later. Only then did Natalie exhale quietly. "I hate him," she announced. "Noted," Adrian replied. Evelyn looked between them. "Friend of yours?" "No." The single word carried enough history to fill several years. Before Evelyn could ask another question, Adrian's phone rang again. He checked the screen. A shadow crossed his face so briefly she almost missed it. Then he looked at Natalie. "Conference room. 5 minutes." He walked away immediately. Natalie watched him go with visible concern. "That," she said softly, "is not a good expression." Evelyn's attention remained on the hallway where Adrian disappeared. Something uneasy settled low in her stomach. Not because Vale Group was collapsing, because powerful men had started circling while it happened. And Adrian Vale suddenly looked like someone preparing for war.